all over the world, more than 500 people connected with us. Thank you so much for being here with us in this day, in this summit, this Digital with Purpose summit. We will start the afternoon with a meeting about delivering solutions for education in a rapidly changing digital world. And now let's talk about education, and we will have an interactive session with all summit participants, so be aware of that, physical and virtual, of course, to see what they can do to support and what concrete actions they can take the next months to support measurable positive contributions to solutions. So let's start with Veerle Vandeweerd. I think I said it wrong, but don't worry, she will punish me. Co-convener COVID Education Alliance, Global Entrepreneurship Center. And the speakers are Georgios Kostakos, co-founder and executive director, Foundation for Global Governance and Sustainability, José Crespo Carvalho, CEO from Instituto Universitário de Lisboa, Stephen Downs, Internet and New Media Researcher, will be with us in a remote way. Rogério Carapuça, President from the Portuguese Association for the Development of Communications, and Maria Lopes Saraiva, Senior Strategy Manager from Google. Please welcome them all.
Hi. Good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch. I know some people are still upstairs there somewhere having and enjoying their coffee, but at least thanks for coming and thanks for coming in time. My name is Veerle Vandeweerd and I will be your moderator in this session. You know, we had quite a morning. I don't know how many of you have followed the morning, but I found it extremely interesting, full of information, action-oriented, great panels. So I hope that we will be able to continue this afternoon, and in fact with the most important topic, if you ask me, education. If we want to achieve the SDGs, and particularly SDG 4, about education for all, decent education for all, lifelong learning and digital education, if we want to achieve all the SDGs, if we don't achieve SDG 4 on education, I don't think we will be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is why it is so important that we are here together to discuss how can the digital, the ICT companies help us in achieving this very important goal. And I must say, since COVID, there is a big realization that we have to change the education system. The education system, is not apt for the future which is coming, which is mainly a digital future. And so we hope that indeed the education system is going to change. I was very happy, and Georgios reported on this, that in New York last week, the Secretary General himself convened a conference on the need to change the education system using the digital technology. And of course, being here in a conference for ICT companies, we all know that the ICT companies are massively investing in digital education. A market now of a couple of hundreds of thousands of billions is estimated to come to 2 to 3 trillion by 2030. So the private sector is massively investing in education, digital education. This session, we are going to try to make as interactive as possible. We have divided it in 4 sessions. The very first brief session is about, again, stating why does the education system has to change, from the primary to the university education. The second session, Steve, who is here with us from Canada, and our colleague from Google, will briefly explain or give you flavor on how many digital tools are existing already at this moment in time. For Zoom meetings to content, a lot is already available at this moment in time. And the third session is the most important, aligned with what Louise asked us in the morning, is to try to identify the critical actions that we can report on in 1 year that can help and the governments and the private sector and the people in the teaching profession to really make one step forward to make this digital education for the SDGs a reality. And so the last session, I hope we will have time to communicate with you, seeing what your feelings are about these priority actions, where you want to take some proposals or put some proposals on the table on how you could help us making this transition to an education for all, digital and lifelong learning a reality in the near future. So without further ado, Georgios, the floor is yours. If you want briefly to introduce yourself, for all the speakers in the beginning, if you briefly want to introduce yourself when you first time take the floor. Georgios,
thank you,
why
Veerle.
do we need to change?
Okay, before getting there, to tell everybody that, like yourself, I have a background with the United Nations, right? So for me, I approach this issue of digital with purpose from a governance perspective, global governance perspective, and education also comes in as a way to create world citizens who can fully participate in the benefits and the decisions of the digital world that we have moved in. So it's from, not as an education expert, although I also teach occasionally at the universities, etc., but this is my angle. And I would like to say then that what we see today is a world that is changing at breakneck speed. And one profession that was relevant today is not relevant tomorrow, right? So in all of these sectors, from mobility to medicine to, we heard also before other speakers, to agriculture, etc., and health, these things that you think you know and you were taught at the university some years ago may not be valid anymore to secure you a decent living, may not be enough to enable you to do your job properly. So already there, we see immediately a need for continuous education, lifelong learning, to which we should all be open. And of course, digital means enable that today. To do it, it's easier to do that, but you have to know how, and you have to be in that spirit. Also, we often teach in old ways. Like, I suppose at some point the blackboard was invented in the past, and it was a major innovation. But now we use Zoom, or we used during the COVID years. There is gaming, right? Games through which you learn. There are artificial intelligence and virtual reality tools that you use. We have to introduce them, all of them, in the mainstream of education. And of course, it's usually private companies, IT companies that come up with new solutions that we couldn't have thought of. And we hear, I think that Stephen will tell us also all these kinds of tools that exist in the digital world. So we need all that, and we need also a partnership between the private and the public sector. The public sector has the education systems and the obligation to give free and basic education, at least in Europe, to all people, and that is very good, but it has to be of the quality that's needed, and to have the right focus, and as we said, to learn how to learn throughout one's life, because otherwise you cannot compete and you cannot live a life that is fulfilling in many respects. So we have this SDG 4. I was there at the beginning of the SDGs, the Rio Plus 20 conference, when the Millennium Development Goals that existed before, these goals that focus the attention of the international community, but also of countries, to priorities that are needed, things that have to be achieved for all of their citizens to have a good life. And they were succeeded, the Millennium Development Goals, by the Sustainable Development Goals, agreed in 2015, 17 of them. They cover economic, environmental, and of course social issues. And number 4 is about education. And it says clearly there that everybody should have access to quality education, lifelong education, and also without the restrictions in terms of gender and or nationality or whatever. So we are trying to achieve that, and it's easier to do it through digital means if we find the right balance between the public and the private, the digital and the substantive also. Because even if we use new tools, it doesn't mean that the human condition has changed dramatically, and we don't need to talk about some of the same perennial issues. And our initiative with the Foundation for Global Governance Sustainability, of which I'm Executive Director, and the Platform for Transformative Technologies, we have launched this COVIDEA initiative, the COVID Education Alliance, with experts from from pedagogy, from technical fields of IT, but also of governance, where we try to combine digital, high-tech, and the basic thing that one needs to know today, which are for us not only knowledge, but also judgment. You have to be able to tell between fake news and real news. With all this social media, etc., and the news that bombard us, if you don't have the judgment, if you don't have the moral also grounding in a way to be able to decide for your life and for the society as a whole, then I think you are even more lost than before. We also, therefore, need to build citizenship. We have to build resilience in people. We see that one crisis succeeds the other. Today, we have always climate, and we had the pandemic now. We have a war in Europe even and elsewhere. All these things, to be able to withstand them and successfully proceed with your life and society as a whole, you need to build those skills and capabilities that sometimes they are ignored or they are considered as a given. But we have to focus on them, and digital tools, we can talk afterwards in more detail, can help us teach them also.
Well, thank you, Georgios. So you not only say why we need to change, but also how already we need to change. Build character, build judgment, build resilience,
and citizenship.
build citizenship, which is topics which at this moment in time are not taught in school. It's only building knowledge, but I always say the knowledge is in my telephone these days. So Professor, from your perspective, being a professor here at the University in Lisbon, why do we have to change? How do you see it happening? What has to change?
Okay, thank you. First, I would say that we have to change. That's my first statement. But to change really in universities, I would say, and forgive me for saying this, I would say we need more pandemics. To change really. Because if we don't have extreme events, we cannot change because it's the culture of the university that is not changing. That is the problem. And if we don't have these events, we can, of course, we can go to the basics of universities. We deal with people, we deal with relationships, and we also deal with knowledge. And who maintains and keeps the knowledge are the professors. So you have to work with the professors to change this, or to have extreme events to push them to change. If not, probably the change will be very, very small, I would say. It's possible to introduce digital, but I have to alert everyone that is here that by adding more and more layers of digital and a lot of stuff in terms of digital, and by having online models, hybrid models, software that allows us to do some things, simulators, all that stuff, we are somehow dividing the world. Because some universities can do this because they have enough money, some others can't. And don't forget this, half of the population in the world doesn't have proper access to internet. So this is a quite challenge. It's a quite big challenge for the future. So I would say it's necessary to change the culture. it's necessary to bring privates in. It's necessary to do some little more things that I will explain later. But I would say, honestly, we need extreme events to change.
Thank you. It's a bit sad that you need extreme events to bring the change we all seem to agree we need, and to make the change to make our young people ready for the future. But I'm scared that I have to agree with you. But okay, let's first listen to Stefan. And just Stefan, could you give us a rundown on what type of digital tools already exist that could help us to make this change? Thank you, Stefan. Is there any place where you find all these tools together? You were dividing them in 3 different categories. You say there is plenty, but I know, for example, coming from Belgium, if you are a teacher, it would not be so easy to know which one to pick and where to find them. So could you give us some guidance where to start the search for these digital tools? I didn't want to make advertisement for your website, but with this it's maybe done. There is another website, Holland IQ, who also lists very well all the different information. But then we have one of these companies who are, sorry? Yeah, so but now it's very good. Yeah, very good and very up to date, and also shows the investments which are going in developing these different tools. But we have here somebody from Google who is also very active in the whole educational field. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And yes, and Google search is also a great place to search for
Well, exactly.
education resources. Thanks so much for having us here. I wanted to focus specifically, I agree in full with the points made. I wanted to focus a bit on the employability and employer outcomes, tying more into jobs, which is a condition that is tied to another SDG, but also quite important in the context of education. So the example that I wanted to bring in here is the Google Career Certificates, which is an initiative that was actually sprung out of a problem within Google, where we wanted to hire more non-traditional talent into IT support roles within the company. So we leverage existing expertise within Google to build out training and a certificate to hire people from non-traditional backgrounds. It was so successful within Google that we decided to open it up to the general public. We put it on Coursera, which is, as Stephen said, one of the biggest MOOC providers. And since that has seen, significant impact in terms of the applicability into jobs, looking at 75% of people who have completed the certificate actually getting promotions, new jobs, raises. So it's important for us to tie these certificates to jobs outcomes. This is actually some of the teams that built the certificate, but also IT support roles. We wanted to go a bit beyond that, and so we worked with different research companies to understand how we can potentially expand that to other areas. So we looked at jobs that were in high demand and high growth, but also that had a good level of entry-level roles, because a lot of these certificates, we wanted to make sure that they were accessible with no previous experience required, so that people, as you made the point, it is about lifelong learning. So we want to make sure that even if you've worked in one industry or in one job for a serious amount of years, you're able to transition then to something different that is in high growth for the future. So here you can see some of the 5 certificates that we have now. So beyond IT support, which was the original, we expanded to UX design, data analytics, project management, and now more recently with digital marketing and e-commerce. And again, these are all built by Googlers with experts that review and have really a very job-specific angle to it. And I think beyond that, the advantage, and we talked a bit about this, is the flexibility it can give you if you're a worker, right? Lifelong learning is also about making sure that you have flexible time to learn, and these certificates can be done with under 10 hours a week over a course of 3 to 6 months. So really you can do it at your own pace. But I think what really sets it apart beyond these characteristics, it's what we talked a bit about, which is twofold. So the applicability into jobs also comes with hiring. So we have built globally a hiring consortium that hires from the pool of certificates, and this is something that we're growing across various regions, and it's an important way of making sure that the 75% that I mentioned, it continues to evolve. But also in the context of using AI and machine learning, it's also about how you prepare for the job and how you use what you've learned in the certificate to showcase it effectively in your interviews. So we've built this tool which is called Interview Warm-Up, and it's a tool based on AI and machine learning where you can prepare for your interviews, you can voice your answers, and it gives you real-time feedback in terms of how you could structure your answer around different types of certificates. So I feel like it's a good example of innovation within technology that helps to tie the education and the jobs outcomes. The second point in terms of differentiation is how you bring it to market. And we talked a bit about this, the private-public collaborations, which are really important to land this effectively in country. In Portugal, for example, we had the opportunity to partner with APDC and EFP to bring it to Portugal in the context of scholarships too. So we want to make sure that those that are most affected and needed the most also are the ones who get it free of charge. So we've done 150,000 scholarship across Europe, but then in Portugal 6,000 of those in Portugal, and continue to reevaluate and assess the impact on that. And I think these are what could make the difference between having the content but actually bringing it to market in an effective way. So this is an example. Google continues to invest in bringing and supporting economic contribution, and that goes through upskilling a lot. And this career certificates is one example of an initiative that we have under Grow with Google program, which has trained more than 80 million people in basic digital skills and the digital skills of the future. And it's an area that we'll continue to invest and partner with organizations at the global and local level to bring it to life.
Google training 80 million people. I didn't know this one. I didn't know that Google was involved with education. And so, but I learned this, and it's quite amazing. And I was just going to ask Stefan, Google search, also, again, I never thought about this one as a digital education tool, or a tool that at least assists digital education. Was this in your list or in the list of Holon IQ? Would you find Google search there as one of the tools people should consider? So I think, I don't know if Louis is here, but Louis, we should get Google, being part of the education testing in digital with purpose, and to make that when they develop all these tools, that of course they also take into consideration the SDGs. I quickly want to ask José, are these certificates, are they then recognized by universities, or is this two different tracks that have nothing to do with each other?
Market, and if they give some employability, and if they are strong enough to be considered by the ones that are receiving new people, well, it's fair enough. It's market working. I don't have nothing else to say, because otherwise we can complement each other, and as I said, we can bring the private sector inside the public university in several ways, and one of the ways is this one, just trying to complement our offer with your offer.
And I think this is a good link to our next intervention, where we start now reflecting, what are now some of the solutions, what are some of the ways forward to really bring digital education into the education system, into the lifelong learning, in a way that is aligned with the SDGs. So, Rogério, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veerle. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Luis, for inviting me. We are in a summit called Digital with a Purpose. And what better purpose can one have than having people living better lives, having better jobs, or even having a job, because all the jobs in the future somehow will be digital, and having people staying in contact when an extreme event happens, as COVID did. So what better purpose can we have? So that's why having enough skills in the global population about digital tools, about digital applications, is a must. That's why also we have to have as many digital talents to be available to the various companies that need them, is also a must. That's why we can help people that do not have digital skills, that are enrolled in jobs that they don't like anymore, that there are no market for them, to be able to get a better job. That's the purpose we are trying to help with a contribution, which I'm going to show you in a brief presentation. So this is an example of what can be done, and this is an example of what our association is doing with our partners. APDC is the Portuguese Association of ICT companies, so telecom operators, media operators, digital companies in general. And we are partnering not only with our associates, but also with the public entities, with the public agencies that are focused on this problem of having more jobs, of having more digital training. And also, of course, with the students that want to have a new opportunity to have a better job. And we devised this initiative called Upskills, Digital Skills and Jobs. And it was devised some 1 or 2 months before COVID hit us. So we signed the agreement with all the partners on the 4th of March, 2020. And we have conceived all the program during COVID, and we started teaching it also during COVID. And the objective was to increase by 3,000 in 3 years the number of people that were available for real jobs in our sector. Please note that we are not training people in abstract for them to be able to find a new job. We are training people for jobs that are offered by the companies that are our associates. So we start by getting all the requests for profiles that can be trained in the 9 months action, in the 9 months initiative. We start by getting all the requirements that the various companies would send to us. And then we devised the courses together with the academia, with the Portuguese universities, Portuguese polytechnical institutes around the country. And we have requested for the candidates to send us their applications in order that we could have them on the next program. And we did that before COVID. There's BC and DC. Before COVID, after COVID, AC. So we have requested those candidates, and there is a particular important issue in this program, is the fact that it is bound by a contract between the Portuguese public institutions and the companies. The companies would say how many technicians they want and which profile, and they are obliged by contract to employ at least 80% of those that they requested, with a given salary as a minimum. Then the companies would fund as well an on-the-job training part of the program, which is the last 3 months. And on the public entities side, they will pay to the universities to teach the first 6 months of the program, which is in-class training, and they will pay for the students a minimum scholarship equal to the minimum wage in Portugal in order for them to be able to leave their jobs if possible, if they want, in order to enroll in this program if they are not satisfied with their jobs, of course. So, this is a sustainable program because the students are paid for going to the program. This is a sustainable program because the companies are willing to have the candidates being hired at the end of the program. And it's also a sustainable program because we have a team matching the candidates with the various programs. So we did that for 2 years already. You have here a map showing the Portuguese, the country. And we, as you can see in the first edition of the program, we have trained 430 people with 5,600 candidates, from a pool of 5,600 candidates. Then on the second edition, which is ending now, we have trained 802 people from 6,000 candidates. We had 38 companies in the first edition enrolled in the program, 64 in the second, and we have courses, as you can see, a little bit all over the country, is the light green color that you can see here on the map. So we have promised to have a third edition, which is starting right now, and we have a goal of reaching 3,000 people in 3 years. Please note that the first year we had around 1,500 requests from the companies before COVID, but after COVID, that was reduced to around 430. So that's the reason why the first year had less people, but as you can see in the second year, we had already more or less the double of what we could do in the first year. So this is our example. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you. A very good example of how, you know, a new initiative quickly comes to the market to respond to the demands of the market, and in the same way create digital jobs for people who were not so happy with their previous job. I think a good example on how, in fact, quickly, you know, the private sector or institutions can respond to a need. José, when I would turn to you and say, you know, solutions, something very concrete. When Louis did his introduction, he says, I want something we can do next year, so that next year, when the next conference is happening, we can come and report to it. Can you give us an example?
I can say first, I am a privileged guy because I run a body inside a public university that is a private body of executive education. So I have the flexibility to propose, to draw, to create my own programs with companies, without companies, and so on and so forth, which means that I'm not representing really a public university. To change a public university is another thing, but I think that is possible, a possible push to move and to change is through 3 things. First thing that is very, very important. International accreditators, which means that AACSB, EQUIS, AMBA, all these accreditors, they can somehow push schools, and in particular management schools, business schools, to go further in terms of digital. First. Second, I think the accreditation body, at least the national accreditation body, A3ES, can also push us to do more things, more and more things, and to introduce in the curriculums more digital not digitalization, digital, okay? It's quite, there is a huge difference between one and the other. Third, I think the ranking system, that we want all to belong to the ranking system. All the schools want to participate in Shanghai rankings, like engineering schools, in the Times Higher Education, in Financial Times, etc. So these rankings are instrumental to create a new atmosphere that brings digital in. If not, it's very complex, because we all aim to go further in terms of rankings, and we are obliged to accomplish a certain number of issues if we want to be there. And by pushing us, these rankings can have some extra clauses, I would say, to qualify us in terms of digital. And these are three things: accreditation bodies, international accreditation bodies, internal accreditation bodies, and rankings. And they can do a lot of things for us in terms of universities.
And who should get this going? Is this the universities? Is this an organization like GASI?
Universities here are neutral. So I think the accreditation bodies, they have to look at this movement of digital and introduce as a requirement the need to put more curricular units, to put more, I would say, formats, because it's not all about content, it's also about formats that are different from the conventional ones. And they have to push us to do that. If not, it's very, very difficult to a university to move, because it's more than a century, 2-3 centuries in some cases of culture that is there. So to move culture from the inside, to change culture from the inside, is very, very difficult. Try to change the culture of your country. You cannot. Just like, no, it's not like that. So you have to have external elements to help you to push. These elements will push you to the movement, to change. If not, we cannot change.
No, and luckily that's also very true, that, you know, the biggest hurdle to transitioning to sustainable society
I want to change.
is human themselves. No.
According to myself, but I see my colleagues, and I know what I'm talking about, because I live in the university for more than 30 years. So there are powers, there are rooms, there are a lot of issues there. They don't want a change, really.
So, Georgios, what are some concrete actions we can take tomorrow, if possible? Tomorrow? Okay. The day after.
To end the human inertia, can you hear me? Oh yeah, there it goes. So yes, we need more crises, but not really, but they do play that role. We hear that. Well, as COVIDEA, we have thought of 3 at least initiatives that are important, and I can describe them to you. They may not happen tomorrow necessarily, but they are in the process of being realized. So one day, hopefully soon. One of them is called the Digital Education Agora. It is something like, if you think in cyberspace, like a city, international city, which is modular. It's like the International Space Station, where you bring elements and you put them together. And that could be the meeting place for educators and students and all the stakeholders of the education process to meet and to exchange good practices, to exchange questions and views. So we see it as you can have a library there where you have curated material about the things we said before. How can you teach resilience? How can you teach judgment? And how can you teach citizenship from good practice from around the world? How also we have like a place where you can demonstrate new technologies, because there are all these new tools that are coming up. And we call it the Digitarium, or something like planetarium. You go and you are impressed by the new stars of the IT universe. You can also have the companies displaying their own products. You can have a gaming alley where students can play but also learn at the same time. You can have the various stakeholders having their own offices and meeting people, the parents, the students having their own meetings. And finally, the cafe in the center, bringing everybody together in smaller or bigger groups. So that will be a World Cafe in the city an agora. The other thing is that we are working already, you know it very well, Veerle, with some countries as part of the United Nations roadmaps for the implementation of the SDGs through digital technologies, through technologies in general. We are trying to persuade countries, some of them to act as pilots and try to rethink their education systems from scratch if possible, not to really abolish what they have and start from zero, but to think very openly what is needed today. And yeah, we are working with some countries already, but we're not there yet to accept that. But there is this whole process around the UN. All the SDGs need to be implemented using technology. And this one also for education, we're pushing that in particular because I think Maria said that before also, the SDG 4 is connected to all the SDGs because if you have people who will work on clean water afterwards, on industrial development, on rights, they have to be trained also, all of them. So this is a basic, this is the basis for a lot of other things. And finally, we're working already with Digital with Purpose and GESI, and we are trying to help them develop a matrix through which you can monitor the company's performance when it comes to the educational content and the educational impact of their products. Because we heard before, the Google search was not probably developed as an educational tool, right? But in the process, it has proven to be quite useful for things that you want to learn. You want to identify a good article or another source of learning, for example. So we want companies to be aware in advance of this potential educational impact of their new products and services. Or if they really want to do it from the start, they produce something for education, to know what they should take in mind, like the interests of the children, for example, because from conventions that exist about that to the actual psychology of a child, you have to be aware when you do something, what impact it may have. So we are working on a matrix on that. And I think that has been implemented, and we hope that it helps both companies and the actual recipients of their products afterwards to have better outputs and more fulfilling results out of all this.
We still have some minutes left, so let's see what the public thinks of all this one. And let's start with the last one. You know, so Georgios was explaining a program Digital with Purpose is implementing, where you try to convince companies that produce software, hardware that is useful or can be used in the educational sector to assess what the impact is on education. And then also to report officially to it so it can be verified. By a raising of hands, who thinks this is a good, concrete first step we could take to ask to companies, if you do something in the field of education, please have a look on how it impacts on the SDGs and what your social and environmental impact is. Are you in agreement with this one, or do you think not that many? Then I will come back to you. Yeah, there are more. Come back to you and ask what you see as the real first steps. Another one, just a second one, which was brought up, if I continue this direction, was that indeed we would ask to governments to start making realistic, cutting-edge digital roadmaps on how to change the education system with the digital tools Stephen and Maria have been explaining. Who would think that this is something that should be done? Oh, that's more. So maybe more government representatives, but at least that could be a very first step. A third one was the Digital Education Agora. I call this the wiki for digital education. And when you're a parent, when you're a student, when you're a teacher, one place where you can go and get the information about the digital tools that are available, soft and hardware, but also with some judgment. So you don't go and tell your child, please do this game because you will learn something, but then the game is about shooting, which I think maybe should not happen. So who thinks that such a wiki, Digital Education Agora, could be something useful, as a step to report on in the next meeting? Some people don't raise their hand at all. Then you will have to stand up afterwards and tell us what your suggestions are, because we want to be action-oriented. We want to move forward. Professor Carvalho was proposing the accreditation system. You know, that we really try to force the accreditation system and the rating system at international, and accreditation system at international and national level to incorporate the need for digital education. Who would agree that this is also a needed first step? There's some other ones, yes. So then over to you, those of you who didn't raise their hands in any of the proposals. What do you think we could do between now and Digital with Purpose Summit #2 in order to really have this needed transition of the education system from a very, sorry to say, old-fashioned, 150-year-old system to a system that prepare our students and our workforce for the digital future that is being developed every single day? Who has a bright idea, you know, to help us out? Come on.
Veerle, may I say something?
Yes, please.
I would like to say that no one changes the world with a big program with a lot of measures and dimensions and whatever. The people who change the world are those that are focused on one thing, one thing only. Do it very well, and it is an impactful thing. So what I would suggest that we will do is to go home and think, which is the only one impactful thing that we can do to help changing the world.
I like this one. I think we should give this an applause, because I think this is action-oriented. No, but I think you're very right. I think if everybody in this room and all the people online would just want to change one thing, practical, in the field, because we are here in the education session on education, that would help. Before I close the session, any of our panel members, do you want to give a last word of wisdom?
I can add a line to that. It's also about local impact. I think, you know, you were very impressed by the 80 million, but that 80 million is only available because of all of the local partnerships that we do across all of the world. And I mentioned the APDC example as one example in Portugal, but I think in order to really have an impact and change, you have to go where people are and affect change locally, and that's a process that normally takes time and effort, but I think one of the investment areas.
So thank you, and please all go home and think about this one thing you're going to change. Come back next year and do report on it. Thank you very much. Thanks to the panel.
Thank you, Veerle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir Stefan? Hi, thank you so much for your participation. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Thank you.